Hello, Sharks fans. I'm Dan Rusanowski here on SJSharks.com with the Executive Vice President and General Manager of the San Jose Sharks, Doug Wilson. Doug, the NHL draft is approaching, which is really the first step of the 2014-2015 season. How excited are you to get going?
Well, it's looking forward to it, put it that way. We were in Toronto for the Combine a little while ago with all our scouts, and they're very well prepared. Looking forward to the 7 picks, 3 that we have in the top 60, and expect to get some real good players.
You've talked to the media extensively after the end of last season about the process that you're going through to rebuild your hockey club. Can you give us an idea of when that process started and where you're at in that process now?
Well, the process started with some of the decisions we made at the end of the year. Some really quality people that won't be back. And as we go forward, we're committed to this rebuild. Many of the other teams in the league that are at the top of the league have had to go through this phase. We feel like we have some very good young players in key positions that certainly helps take this process and speeds it up. We started it a year ago, and we're committed to doing it right now.
There are some teams that look at the word rebuild and they say, well, we're not going to make the playoffs for 5 or 6 years, and some teams have done that. But they rebuilt Madison Square Garden, and they spent almost $1 billion, and they kept the place open, and it stayed first class. Doesn't that essentially encompass what you're trying to do to be as successful as you can while you do this process?
Well, our goal, though, is to do it right. And you take a look at some of the teams at the top of the league. They missed up to 7 years and 10 of 11 years for a team like Chicago, for example. We feel that we're well into the process with 1 year under our belt. We'd like to accelerate that as much as possible, but it's all going to be based upon how our young players step up, some of the players we add, how they perform. And then we'll go from there. But there's no doubt that we're taking 1 step backwards, hopefully to go 2 steps forward.
How has the process of the last couple of years changed the way that you evaluate the way you've drafted and the way you've developed players?
Well, I think that's one thing we do extremely well. You look at the core people that we're turning it over to, the Coutures, Pavelskis, Vlasics, Wingles, Hurdles, Nietos, etc. They're all homegrown people. So that's an area that I think we're extremely good at. I think the onus now goes on our scouting staff. We have 16 picks in the next 2 years, and we were not going to move any of our first-round picks or any of our young guys as we go through this phase. But without that being the lifeblood of what we do, you have to be really good at that to be successful in a rebuild, and we're counting on that.
Fast, hard, and supportive. That's kind of the mantra of the organization. And, of course, when you first started as GM, you had a list of 5 qualities that you wanted. That 5th quality, of course, is the most elusive. Be at your absolute best when it matters the most. But what about the other qualities of loving the game, hockey sense, character, and making others better? How much does that lead into that last quality, and what have you learned about the guys that you have on this roster?
Well, it's all connected. A lot of our players have had some great experiences, whether it be Olympic golds, whether it be winning college championships, Memorial Cups, whatever. You draw upon your experiences, but now what you need to do is you bring it collectively together, the type of teammate that you are, because it's not just the individuals that have that. You have to have a collective environment that makes everybody be accountable for each other, making them better around you, and ultimately to get to where we want to get to, it's teams win. I mean, look at the team that won this year. Extremely close team that battled through Game 7s and found a way to do it. That's what you need to have, and you can have all the talent in the world, but you need that type of dynamic.
Tell me a little bit about that scouting combine that you referenced a few moments ago. It's obviously slightly different than what the NFL does, but what do you learn about the prospective draft picks when you see them there in the flesh?
Well, I think there's certain tests. It's a small part of what you do in your evaluation when you're searching for your young players. Our scouts have watched them many times over the years. They've dug down deep to find the history of the player, the journey of the player, his character, any issues he's had to deal with or overcome in his life. And then when you get there, you see the testing where they're with their own peer group, and it's almost the fortitude with how they test. Do they push through the pain of some of these tests that are painful? And you put all that together, and then you come out with the type of players that you want. Our scouting staff is very well prepared for next week.
What is your greatest area of improvement in that process that you evaluate after looking at it the last couple of years?
Well, one, I think we've been pretty successful when you get guys like Hurdles and Coutures and Muellers. I think is always being open-minded to gathering more information. We've added levels of our interview process and even some of the analytics that we use. When you make your decision, you want as much information as possible, and I think we've pushed the envelope on that too.
The NHL draft over the 2 days is the NHL Stanley Cup final round for Tim Burke and his scouting staff, and wanted to give the fans an idea of not only the hours that Tim and his staff put in, the miles that they travel, but also the quality of the decision-making process that they have to make under pressure at that draft table.
Well, they've made some amazing decisions, for the last 10, 11 years in particular, I think, with our drafting position being later in the first round to come up with quality players. And it's not always your first-round picks. I mean, those are players that you should have a pretty good read on, but being able to find players in the second, third, all the way through the seventh round, and they've got a great history of that. The hours that they put into it, unless you see what they do, you really wouldn't even understand. It's not a job, it's a career, and we've got an excellent scouting staff that nobody's going to outwork them, and they take it very seriously, and the preparation needed with some of the on-the-floor decisions can only be done with that work.
Obviously, you have to make some on-the-floor decisions, too. You've made moves at the draft table. What goes into that, and how much time do you spend before the actual draft occurs to be prepared for that?
Well, you go through a mock draft in many ways. You try to know every team in the league what they're looking to do. What we do is identify the players that we want and then formulate what we're willing to do to move up to get them or move back to get them. You have to value your picks. Probably 5-6 years ago, not as many teams were willing to do that. More and more teams do it now. These scouts work too hard to not walk off the floor with the guys that they want, not just people that just happen to be there.
And finally, you have a bunch of picks in the top 60, and that's got to be a good thing, isn't it?
Well, it is. And, when we started this a year ago, that was one of the thought process. And we've already prepared next year, which is going to be a strong draft. We have 9 picks next year. And I don't think you'll see us moving any of the top picks while we go through this phase.
All the best to you and the staff on that great draft weekend, and good luck the rest of the way.
Great. Thanks, Danny.